Okay, today we're going to talk about probably the best known evaluation model in all of business and industry, and that's the Kirkpatrick model. And the Kirkpatrick model has 4 levels. We'll discuss each of the 4 levels of that evaluation. So Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of the reason for evaluating is to determine the effectiveness of a training program. And again, Kirkpatrick's evaluation models for learning systems, and our focus tends to be more on e-learning today. But that's basically what we're trying to do, is the effectiveness of a training evaluation. Why should you do the evaluation? To gain information on how to improve future programs, to justify the existence of the training department and its budget, and to determine whether a program should be continued or dropped. So this is, gain information on how to improve future programs, one level, but these other ones are pretty high stakes evaluations. The 4 levels are: level 1 is basic reaction. We call that the smiley face level. Level 2 is the learning. Did they actually learn what your goals and objectives were for the training program? Those happen sort of immediately. They happen during the time of the training. And then after program evaluation, this is sometime after the event of the training, you're going to determine whether or not they have exhibited the learned behavior on the job, which is level 3. And then level 4 is to find out, does it impact the bottom line? So here is a pyramid, and so this pyramid sort of represents the frequency of the kinds of evaluations that occur. Again, almost everyone does reactions. The University of Georgia, when you take this class, you're going to do a level 1 evaluation of this course. And it's basically your reaction to the course. It's going to be done immediately following the course. Well, it's going to be done at the end of the semester. That's what most people do. You'll also have a learning evaluation. You'll have a project that will be graded. You have a variety of other tasks that are graded. So part of the goal of the training and the evaluation in the training is to determine if you learned it. What you won't do is I won't be able to find out if you're using these evaluation strategies on the job. Many of you don't have a job yet, so we can't measure that. But that would be the next level, that 3rd level, and that happens a lot less frequently. And then the last thing is, has it impacted performance of the business? Is the business more successful now? Are you selling more widgets because of the training? Are people not costing the business more because they're performing procedures more accurately and not losing product? Whatever the goals of the training were, has it impacted the bottom line of the business? And that's hardly ever done. The 7 keys to evaluation. Analyze your resources. Make sure you have the resources and you have all the materials that you need and the people involved. Involve your managers. It's really important to involve the managers, because that's where you're going to determine whether or not the training actually impacts behavior on the job, because the manager's expectations will drive that. Start at level 1 and continue through all the other 3 levels as resources permit. Again, what happens invariably in business and industry is the resources are really thin and people stop at level 1. They don't go beyond that. And yet there's some pretty high stakes reasons to go on to level 2s, 3, and 4. Like, if you have a training department, you work in a training department within an organization, you can rationalize your existence if you can get to level 4 and show that you're impacting the bottom line of that business. Again, the 4 levels are: evaluate reaction, evaluate learning, evaluate behavior at level 3, and evaluate results, business results, at level 4. So level 1 is this reaction, measures how those who participate in the program react to it. Almost always this is called the smiley sheet evaluation. If they liked it, they put a smiley face. If they don't like it, they put an unhappy face. And it's just measuring reaction to the training. It does provide valuable feedback. If you construct your questionnaire accurately, you can ask them for their reaction to various aspects of the training and what they liked and they didn't like, and you can make improvements to the training based on that. It also tells the trainees that trainers are there to help them do their job better. It really does. It helps build that sort of community that you need to build. Guidelines for evaluating reaction. Decide what you want to find out. This is the same thing with designing training. Let's figure out the objectives you want for the evaluation. Design a form that will quantify that reaction, provide the opportunity for written comments, get immediate response, encourage honest answers, and establish an acceptable standard and take appropriate actions if standards aren't being met. So this is a sheet that shows a level 1 evaluation. It's taken from Kirkpatrick. I'm not sure you'll be able to see that very well, but how well did he state the objectives? This is about your leader, the instructional leader. How well did he state the objectives? And it's excellent, very good, good, fair, and poor. So it's a five level scale. Written scale, and the people, all they have to do is put a check mark next to each of those. There's a great deal of debate about whether or not it should be a 5-level scale or a 4-level scale. In some parts of Kirkpatrick, he talks about having a 4-level, which forces them to take one side or the other, as opposed to a 5-level that if you don't really care one way or the other, you have a middle ground in order to respond to that. But this is the basics. Level 1 evaluation, and it generally has that one in the bottom where you can ask them for open-ended responses, and frankly, those are the things that I tend to pay more attention to in my own evaluations, is the open-ended responses. So here's a couple of examples. I mean, I like this table because, and it's taken from a Kirkpatrick publication that it was in the list of readings in the ELC. But see how it's changed from a trainer-centered question to a learner-centered question, yet it's asking the same thing. The program objectives are clearly stated versus I understood the learning objectives. The program objectives were covered by the instructor versus I was able to relate each of the learning objectives to the learning I achieved. So, and really they're advocating for this wording of your reaction survey to be learner-centric, not trainer-centric. And this is an awesome table. And you should check out that reading and go through that table in detail as you construct your own level 1 evaluations, if that's something that you're going to do in this course for your project. And here's just another part of that table. So pick one out, like facilitator style. The facilitator managed the program well versus I was well engaged during the session. Again, go with the learner-centered ways of phrasing your items. Here's another sort of a look at how it could how your reaction survey could look. This would be more a computer-based option, or it could be paper-based. I found the course materials easy to navigate, going from 1 to 5, where 5 is strongly agree and 1 strongly disagree. You typically have the more negative be the smaller number and the more positive to be the larger number. And then when you do any kind of summary statistics, the bigger the number, the more positive the result is. Here's another one where you might circle the answer. Again, just trying to show you a variety of ways of constructing your reaction survey. And then here, of course, is the quintessential smiley face. The smiley face is very good. The straight line mouth is good, and the sad face is average. Notice that is very good, good, and average. There isn't a negative one there. And so you also need to pay attention to how you label those things. This is actually not a very good one in the sense that there isn't a way to say anything negative. It goes from very good to average. Average, I suppose, could be negative, but it could be something that's less than average. But that option is not available to you on this sheet. So learning is level 2, and so measures the extent to which participants improved knowledge, skill, and or attitudes as a result of attending the program. And so again, this is where almost always you've specified a set of objectives for your training. You want to know if you achieve those objectives, and the way you measure that is some sort of performance measure that will allow you to see, did they achieve those objectives. Guidelines for evaluating: use a control group whenever possible. So you want to compare a control group that doesn't go through the training to an experimental group that does go through the training. Sometimes what you'll do is have the control group go through what the traditional training was, and the experimental group go through the new training, or it could just be no training for the control group. Make sure you get 100% response. You get everybody to do it. Again, you can have outliers, and if you lose those outliers, it can really impact the overall performance of your evaluation. Evaluate knowledge, skills, and or attitudes both before and after the program. So you have a pre-test, so that you make sure that when you randomly put these people into the different groups, that they were equal groups, and you measure that in the pre-test. And then you measure the post-test, and you see what the performance improvement is. So here's an example set of results. Example 1, the pretest experimental group was a 45.5 and the control group was a 46.7. They'll never be perfectly equal, but that's pretty close, 45.5 and 46.5. On the post-test, the experimental group scored 55.4 on average, and the control group scored 48.2. So there's an increase for both of them, but the increase for the experimental group was 9.9, and the increase for the control group was 1.5. And then you would describe that net gain for the experimental condition as being an 8.4 net gain in performance on the test. Now, you contrast that with example number 2. Again, the pretest shows that the experimental group and control group are largely the same, but on the post-test, they both score about 55, with the experimental group getting 55.4 and the control group getting 54.4. The net gain here is 2.2, and in this case you might say that there isn't a whole lot of gain there. The other thing you might want to talk about is, if this is a performance exam based on a 100% scale, if they're scoring 55 on average on the post-test, that indicates that they aren't, on average, they're not passing the post-test exam. So those kinds of factors you also need to pay attention to. If they grow 8.4, if the net gain is 8.4, that looks like an impressive result. But if everybody on average is failing the test, then that actually is a failure of the training program. And I don't know, this is just an example, but it's an example to talk about the numbers and think about the numbers. You don't need to do any high-stakes statistical analyses to do these comparisons. You just have to look at the numbers and make sense of what the numbers mean. Guidelines for evaluating and learning continue. Use a form which can be used by the participants to evaluate knowledge and attitude change. And so what would that form be? It could be on the job. Well, it won't be on the job performance because you're getting at level 3, but you might have them actually do so. You might have, if it's teaching them how to use a cash register, you might have cash registers in the training classroom, and you might measure their performance on that cash register. Use a performance scale for evaluating skills. Again, you'd have something where there's a range of values. And again, it's really important to have a range of values, because if, let's say that last example, the scale was to 60, and so 55 is a good score. Well, what happens on the pretest if you don't have a good enough variability in your scale and everybody scores about 60 on the pretest? Well, your test isn't indicating what they're learning, because they already knew it in the pretest. If the maximum score is a 60, they don't have any room to grow. They already know what you're measuring in that pretest. So make sure there's some variance in the results. Use the same form to conduct both pretest and post-test. It's perfectly fine. Just don't tell them that you're going to be doing that, so that they don't try to memorize things from the pretest. But it's okay to use the same form in the pretest and the post-test. Use the results of the evaluation to take appropriate action. And what's the appropriate action? Well, the appropriate action may be to revise the content if they're not learning the content, or improve the content if they're not doing so well. So here's some examples, and again, they're examples that look a lot like a multiple choice test. So the first 3 items are true and false. The next 3 items are multiple choice. And so again, you're trying to measure performance. A lot of the times what we do, especially when it's a knowledge-based activity, not a skills-based activity, is you give them a test and you score that test to see how they're doing. Level 3 is behavior. Now we're trying to see if they're taking what they learn in the classroom and actually using it on the job. It can be defined as the extent to which change in behavior occurs as a result of attending a training program. And again, the behavior that we're interested in here is the behavior on the job. Conditions necessary to change behavior. The participant must get the opportunity to apply the learning. So again, if you train them on something, but then they aren't expected to actually do that on the job, then they can't exhibit that learning on the job. Participant must have the desire to change, and a good way of having a desire to change is to have encouragement from the management that they ought to be doing these things that they just learned. Participant must work in a conducive climate, again, one where they're encouraged to apply this newly learned material, and participant must be rewarded for changing. So there must be some kind of reward for doing the right thing according to what they've just been trained on. Which is why it's really important to have the stakeholders like managers involved in the process. Guidelines for measuring behavior. It's really important to get a before and after, because you don't know if they've changed their behavior if you don't have a before and after. It also would be really good if you could have a control group to measure before and after. The other thing is you need to allow time to have the behavior change. Sometimes it could take a month before it really gets fully integrated into the workplace. So allow the time for change. The opportunity available to implement the knowledge and skills level. Again, and I've said this before, you really need management support for learning to actually have an impact on the workplace. Use a pattern interview or written survey with the same questions for all participants on the pre-test and the post-test. Do you plan to change your behavior in the future versus did you change your behavior? So again, you can have a future tense for the pre-test. You can have a present tense for the post-test. Decide who will be polled: the participants, the bosses of the participants, the subordinates of the participants, others who would know the participants' behavior, and repeat the research as necessary. So I've seen behavior measured simply by asking the managers, have the people who have gone through this training done those changes as they've gone about doing their work. You could also, if maybe it's management training that you provided, you can ask their subordinates how their behavior has changed or not changed as a result of the management training that you provided. And obviously you can measure it by observing, you can measure it by interviewing, and you can measure it by some sort of written survey. So again, here's an example of a behavior measurement, and again, it's done in a survey sort of fashion. And again, this is for largely an HR sort of training for a manager, and it's asking, are you getting to know my employees, listening to my subordinates, praising good work? These are the kinds of things that you want to be exhibiting. These are behaviors you want to be exhibiting as a good manager if you've now gone through this management training. And so now you want to see, are those behaviors happening? Again, you can ask that of the managers. You can also ask that of the subordinates. Here's another example. It's called a patterned interview. When you left the program, how eager were you to change? With a place for comments. How well equipped were you to do what was suggested? Sometimes they might not feel like they can do it. If you are not doing some of the things that you were encouraged and taught to do, why not? And so it's sort of a table for responding to that. So again, this is sort of a way of assessing it, and often what people want to do is when they want to see behavior change is they want to observe the behavior, but sometimes that's completely impractical. And a survey like this, you could do a survey like this using Google Forms and implement this pretty simply and get at least some sort of a measure as to whether or not people are using the things they've learned in training and they're using them on the job. So level 4 is now looking at what are the business results, measures what final result occurred because of participation in the training program. How much did productivity increase because we conducted a program on diversity in the workforce for all supervisors and managers? What tangible benefits have we received for all the money we have spent on programs on leadership, time management, and decision making? These are things that people higher up are going to want to know. And this is where the stakes get very high for a training department and why you would want to be doing level 4 evaluation, because you basically are building a case for why training is needed, or not needed if you're not being effective. But if you can measure your impact on the business, then you can continue to get the support you need within the organization to continue with the kinds of training that you're providing. Guidelines for measuring results: measure on a before and after basis. You can't measure change unless you know what it was before. Allow time for results to develop, perhaps 6 months or a year. Use a control group if it's possible. Repeat at appropriate times. Consider costs versus benefits. So this is, we'll talk about. Phillips suggested a 4th level to Kirkpatrick's model, and it's simply this results method, and then also calculating the cost for training, and that way you could do a cost-benefit analysis as to whether or not the training was worth it. So if it results in $1 million in business, but it costs $2 million to develop the training, well, then you've lost $1 million in that transaction. So maybe that is not a benefit, that it's the training was too expensive. Be satisfied with evidence if proof is not possible. Just look at the evidence. So that's basically Kirkpatrick's model. There's several readings in the ELC I suggest you take a look at more carefully. As you think about your own training project, you should certainly consider Kirkpatrick's model of evaluation in the 4 levels. And so thank you for your attention, and we'll talk to you next time.